Hello, welcome back to Paladins Gaming. My name is Ben, and today we're going to continue on with Suzerain. Last time we left off, we received word that our economy had undergone a massive turnaround, and then promptly got impeached. So that's fantastic. So let's pick it up here. We're heading to Ansel Rock Prison to meet with our former minister, Lilius Groff. The thrum of the helicopter engine, the first of its kind in Swordland, was deafening as we touched down on the landing pad of Ansel Rock Prison. I stepped out, bracing myself against the salty winds. The noise of the helicopter was replaced by that of squawking seabirds and waves furiously crashing on the jagged rocks below. Flanked by my guards, I walked into Ansel Rock Prison. A team of security personnel led me through the winding corridors on the ground floor. Passing by the rows of cells, I wondered how Livia was doing. Why? Who cares? But that wasn't who I was here to see. At the back of the building, we came to an elevator. The guards punched in a code, and we rode all the way to the top floor of the prison. Lilius had a corner cell, large windows overlooking the seaside. He's equipped with a comfortable-looking bed and a modest writing desk. She appeared to be busy writing letters as guards opened the door to the room. Hello, Lilius.
Mr. President, what brings you all this way?
You spent my entire term trying to undermine me. Why?
I thought you already knew the answer to that. I and my colleagues judged you to be a threat to Swordland. From the start of your term, we felt you were putting the country at risk of succumbing to outside influence. Obviously, we were right. Your hapless attempts to reform the Constitution have gone against everything this country stands for.
Swordfish people want to change. You can't just discard their will. You can if you're fascists.
The people don't always know what's best, as shown by their willingness to follow you into a foolish war that Swordland is ill-prepared to win.
Wait, what? We're not in a war. Okay. And you think you would have done a better job?
I would not have let a proud republic stray so far from its soulless roots.
Is that who those letters are for? Your beloved Tarkin soul?
I know what you're implying.
Lilius drew herself up, her back straight as a rod.
Tarkin Soul is a great man with whom I share many ideals, but my decisions have always been my own, including the decision to sacrifice one man's life to save millions of Swordfish people.
Save them from what, Lilius? Lilius's face darkened.
Oh, you'll see. Sooner or later, the people realize that Soul is the best leader they'll ever have.
This might be a dick move, but it's okay. Guards, take this woman's pens and paper away. They're too dangerous to have lying around. The guards moved in, roughly grabbed Lisa's writing materials off her desk. She looked unfazed.
Thanks for the visit, Mr. President. I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll see each other.
The guards relocked her cell door and escorted me away. On my way back to Holsword, I couldn't help thinking about what she said. How would I be remembered? Nice. Alright. Well, let's check the news first. Well, Holsword Post. President visits ex-minister Groff in prison. What was behind President Rain's visit to former Interior Minister Lilius Groff in Ansel Rock Prison? Shortly after Rain and his anti-corruption police unfairly jailed Ms. Groff in the assassination of notorious communist Bernard Circus, the President made a personal helicopter trip to Ansel Rock in order to visit her cell. Was it a question of further? Could it deal with her for early release, or simply rub salt in her wounds? Only one thing is for certain. Following this development, a president cannot be trusted. And Swordland's Day. Shocker. Groff found guilty of treason and jailed. Government goings-on got a whole lot more interesting as Interior Minister Lilius Groff, one of Swordland's most prominent conservatives, whose support is widely thought to have gotten President Rain elected, was thrown into jail for co-conspiring to assassinate author and MP Bernard Circus at the start of Rain's term. An investigation by anti-corruption police, a new task force founded by Rain, headed up by Justice Minister Mia Morgana, revealed Groff's role in the plot. She's been sentenced to life in Ansel Rock Prison. Who in the Rain administration will go next? Or will be next to go. Whatever, same thing. Nice. Okay, we had a report from earlier on some modern airplanes. Cannot do words today, apparently. ATO modernizes Air Force with new planes. Sordland's Minister of Defense, General Josef Lancia, is reporting that we have received the supplies of new aircraft from ATO. According to his report, we have added S-16 fighter jets and Venture Express VE-34 bombers to our Air Force, equipped with modern avionics, more accurate radar-guided gun sights, and a superior weapons loadout. Sordland S-16 supersonic jet fighter gives our Air Forces a decisive edge in aerial combat. Their speed and maneuverability are exceeding our pilots' expectations. They're nicknaming these new aircraft as Arcasian Hornets. Cool. And I guess let's head to Holsword for this military parade. And try to figure out what this war is that we're totally not actually in. I don't know what the old lady was rambling about. Alright. It was an unusual day for the residents of Holsword. Regularly used streets and avenues were blocked off by military personnel. Many shops and cafes were closed, and once crowded stores were now empty. Instead, thousands of residents in Holsword were concentrated in one street, Victory Avenue. Stretching out through the heart of Holsword, people on both sides of the road were waving their Swordfish flags proudly for the military parade. I was getting prepared to embark on my trip. It's going to be a short drive down Victory Avenue until we reach Maroon Palace. My company for this trip was Joseph with Serge, as usual, driving the presidential car. Joseph approached me. He was wearing his decorated ceremony outfit. He carried a sword with a goat head at the handle and his pistol by his hip. He put on his cap. Oh, what a goat head sword.
Mr. President, we're almost ready. We will depart right after the tank column.
Good. Joseph nodded. After hearing the loud thump of a book falling down to the floor, he turned to a couple privates who were doing the preparations on the schedule and started walking in their direction.
Private, can't you do your job properly?
Watched the young soldiers perform a lousy salute to Joseph.
What is that salute, soldier? Watch, this is the real salute.
He performed an excellent salute, and after scolding the privates, he walked back. Strict as ever.
Old habits die hard.
Serge appeared from the entrance and joined us. Mr. President, Mr. Lancia. Serge performed a salute. Performed a salute to Joseph, which made Joseph smile under his mustache.
It is, Mr. Faulkner. Are you ready to spot yet?
Yes, sir. Follow me, please. He started following Serge through the corridors. I'm pretty sure I screwed up his voice there, but that's okay. Mr. President, have you seen the tanks? Our planes too?
Robert will be so scared when they see this.
There we go. Yes, Serge, I have seen it.
My kids are very excited to wake up today, to see the planes fly. Serge, where did you do your military service?
Mona, 7th Artillery Squadron. I still talk with many of my friends from those days.
Roderick military is never forgotten. I still talk with many from my days as well.
What about you, sir?
Always Solden. Mr. President was in my command once, Schooner outpost.
He turned to me.
Do you remember those days?
Unfortunately, I do. Rough times.
Indeed, those were rough times. I also remember Mr. President did not like to execute direct orders from his superiors.
I did what needed to be done.
Which was still disobeying orders, but I won't delve into the past. We are here, sir.
That just went Lucian. Oh well. We exited the building and walked to the clearance where the Black Cadilla, the presidential car, was waiting. It was decorated properly for the event. The top canopy had been removed so that I could stand and wave to people. On the way to the car, generals and admirals were lined up on both sides of the carpet. The atmosphere immediately changed when these experienced men who fought many times in their country saluted me. I saluted back with respect. I saluted the high-ranking military staff and attachés from ATO. We shook hands before proceeding. I entered the car and Serge started the engine. Joseph saluted me. We were on our way shortly.
Good luck, Mr. President.
The car started rolling. Even though there were many walls and trees in between the car and the crowd, I was able to hear the deafening sounds of cheering citizens. Gradually, we made our way to the starting point. A group of 10, maybe 12 latest technology S-16 fighter jets flew above our heads, and I thought that the engine sound was going to be me death. Loud footsteps of the marching soldiers were followed by loud noises coming from tank engines. The tanks came into my view. They were not the most modern models, however they displayed a military might. I couldn't even finish my thought, and one of the tanks broke down and had to be towed. Nice. We waited for a few minutes for the announcement. Finally, it was our turn. On both sides of Victory Avenue, there are numerous citizens cheering my name, waving their soldiers' flags. I saluted. Looking at the benches where the general staff was sitting at, I saw Tarkin Sol sitting next to General Falcon. We kept our slow and steady pace. We were almost at the Arthur S. Vichy statue several hundred meters away. A group of soldiers saluted me as we passed by. They looked proud and stout in the new infantry uniforms with brand new rifles. We continued on as per the schedule and finally arrived at the Maroon Palace, which marked the end of the parade. People of full sort dispersed to their homes. A clear message was sent to Rumberg by the display of our military might. We were about to see whether it would be enough or not. I mean, he had to tow a tank in the middle of the parade because it broke. That's not super threatening. Nice, okay. Alright, well, that appears to be everything here, so let's continue on to the next turn. Will of the States. Nice, okay. So, it looks like we just have one news article and then the story beat. Let's check the newspaper from Geopolitico. World leaders gather at Alliance of Nations. Calling for a session on the current affairs, world leaders will be gathering at Alliance of Nations next week. The main highlights from the upcoming agenda were announced, and as expected, they will be around the current issues in Eastern Maricopa. In addition to the member states from the region, President Walker and Chairman Millenniev will be delivering their speeches at the Assembly. All eyes will turn to Constantium, Cairo, as the historic session will be taking place in the Alliance of Nations headquarters. Yep. Alright, guess we got a report first. Schedule for the Alliance of Nations session. We have received the schedule for the upcoming Alliance of Nations session. According to the dates outlined, Sordlin 1 is being prepared for the flight to Constantium, Cairo. Minister of Foreign Affairs David Vichy will be attending the session as well as accompanying Mr. President on the flight. Cool, yeah. Alright, well, let's fly to Cairo. Sounds like it's maybe Turkey or something? I don't know. I, David Vichy, and the rest of the Sordish delegation to the Alliance of Nations arrived in Cairo. The local police escorted us to the Alliance's headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognizable by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met with a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the third floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people in one gleaming dome. Yeah, let's go with this one. And I'm glad to be among them. Everyone's words and actions here will change the world for better or worse. How are you feeling, Anton? Being president must have taken a toll on you and the family. We've managed, somehow. It is tough to be the president, making harsh decisions and dealing with the consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. For what it's worth, I appreciate all the advice you've given me. Yeah, thank you, Anton. From the distance, you could see the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session's about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's gonna be a long day. Mr. Nines opened the session with a short speech and called the first speaker to the floor. It's my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address the Assembly. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked to the podium as the Assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. Hey, let's see how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. David chuckled. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. Of all the challenges Eastern Maricopa and the whole world are facing today, one has grown larger and more eminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Volkson. Saw Emmerich Hagel pounding his fists on the table in protest. Looks like the Chancellor's already mad. David nodded. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever.
CSP, under the leadership of United Quintana, has been fueling Volxon's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in Eastern Macopa. The world cannot turn a blind eye to the increasing naval presence of Volxon in the Machian Sea. We hereby call for the immediate withdrawal of all naval vessels with any offensive capability from international waters. A lot of noise came from the assembly hall in response. Most of the Western Macopan delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist teachings, a state that wages war against its own innocent civilians, Raylan. He has a point. David nodded intently. Their purge of minorities in their country was again largely ignored by the international community, how it goes so far as calling it genocide. They violated our past treaties, mobilized their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders and authorizing them to partake in massacres. SP was affected not only by the large wave of refugees coming from Valen, but by the subsequent government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. We hereby call the member states to action against Valen and its rogue government. Thank you. That wasn't a bad speech. I agree. Too bad his voice went really wrong there for some reason, but that's okay. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Marcopan delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next speaker, President of Valen, Victor Smolak. Smolak stood up. As he walked past Patricio Alvarez, he brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few seconds. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. Man, look at all the theatrics. Yeah, that's him. Victor turned to President Nines and bowed slightly.
Mr. President.
He then turned back at us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds.
Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Kairut. And what do? They make threats, promote hate, and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Where is the cooperation and friendship? Where is the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupy our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they do not know when to stop. The ATS soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow delegates, don't you dare speak about Valen before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past.
It's kind of an empty argument. It doesn't justify what they did.
Yeah, what'd you expect, Mr. President? It's President Smolak. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Valen Civil War, Orkazi made a deal with United Quintana, where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of our army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone in facing the genocidal Bluish Freedom Front, which the ATO funds together with Rumberg. I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference.
He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth.
I have clear evidence of direct aid from Rumberg to the Bluish Freedom Fund. They smuggled tons of KA-74s in Valen. They smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders.
Huh, he's finally talking about it. We're not the only ones now.
Yeah, sure it seems. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect this organization to do its task and investigate this properly instead of leaving Valen behind, as they have always done. Going back to the claims of lesbian representative. First, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Vajak forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to militant BFF, not the Bluids in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of BFF, and your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Fourth, as the state, we only took what was ours, and the companies the delegate spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Valen by force. Know that Valen will no longer recognize the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons are permitted to possess, and we are permitted to possess, or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Valen stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken, the enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now, I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connections of the West with the armed militants east of Macopa. and I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what's right. Valen only wants peace. Our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. The proclamation is, Free Valen or death. The assembly roared, with a particularly loud applause coming from the seats of Rican nations. He seems to be popular with Rika, doesn't he? Well, he played the victim here pretty strongly, and his anti-imperialist stance has definitely earned him sympathy from Ricans. Most of that continent has still not achieved stability after gaining their independence from the colonial suzerains. It's easy to forget it's only been a few years since the revolutions. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted the Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nines invited Martin Van Horn to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fists. I could almost see his jaw trembling. He looks pissed. Yeah, can't you blame him? His navy's being harassed by Falkland every day now. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nations, and in particular Falkland, have shown us what they're willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must first thank the delegates from Swordland for being brave enough to support Agnolia when the whole world left us alone. We were one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation between Eastern Markopan nations. Yet when we were threatened by Foxandian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't keep myself from wondering where he was when our fleets were under attack by the very socialists he spoke about. So, here I am, asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Falkland. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of Oxonian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on the table. They need to learn some respect. Yeah, that's for sure. Mr. President, please moderate the assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Emmerich Hagel began shouting curses as Nines repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled, and Nines allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, our drilling ships, oil tankers, even fishing vessels have been disappearing in the Markian Sea, captured or sunk by Falkland. The Falklandian fleet is patrolling the seas around Helluland with complete disregard for international laws. I call on the Alliance of Nations to find a resolution to this never-ending conflict that Falkland created. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all naval forces from our territorial waters. Millennialist terror surrounds us on all sides. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of millennialism, authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The banging noise started again. Hagel stood up and approached the rostrum.
You're a spineless jerk, a lackey of Arcasian imperialism.
President Nines called for silence and started hitting the gavel. This might not be a good idea, but we're doing it. I stood up. Let him speak. What are you so afraid of? You won't even let him finish.
You have no right to intervene. Know your place, President Rain.
President Nines smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. I probably should have gotten involved, but it was funny. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Volksanian delegates convinced Hagel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about the subject. Everything is clear as day. Mr. Hagel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Falkland and the corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegate. The two left the assembly hall. President Nines announced the next speaker, Emmerich Hagel. Hagel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, soothing tone.
Thank you.
Welcome a lot. It's Chancellor Old Man's time.
It looks like you're having fun, Mr. President.
I mean, someone's got to.
First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Rika that have joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they more than earned all membership votes. I'm overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Markopa raised, pillaged, and exploited the continents of Rika and Xena. Sadly, Falkland was also part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the ideas of imperialism. But when our masters found their voice, the old colonial powers and the new financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs on the blood and sweat of the working class. And now they've started labeling us the aggressors. Yet we all know it was the Arcasians who built up military bases all around Macopa. It was the ATO that first formed to fight against millennialism.
He's exaggerating. Yeah, do you think so? He's not entirely wrong. Well, if he's not entirely wrong, that means he's exaggerating.
Falkland holds the right to protect its territorial waters and trade from threats. The delegates from Lesbia and Agnolia brought up the Folenko Treaty. But what were they doing when ATO forces patrolled the Antisaean Sea?
Sure.
They were silent. And what about Helluland? How about the Folks being killed by the Agnolia government because it protested against an appointed governor? Agnolia and their allies in Solent have no right to claim they are upholding liberty and democracy. Other nations have no right to intervene in matters between Agnolia and Falkland. Just as no country in the world has the right to determine what type of naval vessels we use, no country can force us not to defend our seas. If there's a conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start the Arcasian base on Lavamos Island. Lesbia has been housing Arcasian troops and missiles by our border for years, and none of the member states even talked about it. I also want the member states to look into the Arcasian bases, both Lesbia and Solent. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they cannot stay silent about what the Agnolia government did in Helluland. How they took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then there can be a proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But, unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Volkslandian government is ready as always to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. Ah, jeez. Revolution Vescore.
Was that Swordish? Did I catch that right?
Yeah, he said the revolution will come, but yes, it was in Old Voglish. Very similar to Swordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent.
Most of the delegates from Xena, Rika, and Katana responded with thunderous applause. Hegel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nines announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Yeah. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world. Just as my fellow Eastern Macopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continents, I also have to bring attention to the plight of the people of the North. The Alliance of Nations, the ATO, the CSP, and even OPEC have never supported our people when they've been through tragic atrocities. Unlike many of the Western countries here, we never received financial aid when natural disasters struck our lands. The pain of our people was never recognized, not even when they faced the threat of genocide by the hands of the Swedish kings. In light of all that, I implore this alliance to take a closer look at the actions of our southern neighbors. Not so long ago, Solon reinforced its forces along our borders. They took in traitors and gave them protection. The President even went so far as to blame our country for spying on his administration through his own private secretary. He expects the world to believe his lies.
That old hag. Let's first hear it out. You don't want to be another asshole just screaming in the middle of the conference, do you?
I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Solent. If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust Rhonda to take matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that the Rumberg will not stand idly by while causing military transfer to Eastern Macopa. I hereby condemn both the ATO and Solent for allowing Akazu to settle in our region. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I'm looking forward to reading reports. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Thank you. Grand awakening? Sounds like the old bag's threatening us.
That sounded like a threat.
That's what I just said, old man. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President Nine spoke my name. Mr. Anton Rain, President of Sortland, I invite you to address the Assembly. David immediately started applauding.
Good luck, Mr. President.
Walked up to the rostrum and took my place at the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. The representation of Swordland was pleased to address this assembly. Swordland remains committed to the Alliance of Nations and the ideals that gave birth to it. Boy, okay. We must remain devoted to the dream of a peaceful and free world, a united world. Our world is faced with the dangers of division, the dangers of large military alliances, nuclear arms races. Today, we're confronted by a difficult choice. Our great achievements may either be used for the benefit or to the detriment of mankind. Now, I'd like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. We are deeply saddened by the tragic events that took place in Valen. But we will continue our cooperation with Valen. I'd also like to extend my support to Mr. Van Horten. Swordland stands together with Magnolia, and will keep its stance against Foxlanian aggression. Swordland will do whatever it takes to achieve peace in Eastern Marcopa. Emmerich Hagel pounded his fist on the table again.
Peace, you can achieve nothing. You are a puppet of our council.
President Nine slammed his gavel down. I stopped myself from responding. I would also like to address the Queen of Rumburg. We talked about some hypothetical threat that our nation poses to Eastern Marcopa, while Rumburg's military has tripled in the last decade. We wanted to be diplomatic even when Rumburg shot down our plane. I also have some evidence to show to the Assembly. Mr. Smolak was right about the Ka-74s. We discovered that many militant groups in Swordland were being financed or armed by Rumburg. There is another important piece of evidence that we have, provided to us by someone close to the Rumburgian government. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumburg, blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumburg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. Now I'd like to bring my speech to a close. Let's go with that. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Swordland and Eastern Marcopa, just as those in other continents. The people of Swordland and I are honored to have expressed our concerns before this noble assembly. Peace in Marcopa, peace in the world. Patricio Alvarez stood up and started applauding.
Well spoken.
I heard thunderous applause from half the assembly. Thank you. I left the podium. I walked back to my seat. David did not stop applauding until I sat down. Thank you, David.
Yeah, it was not a bad speech, Mr. President. You did well.
President Nines announced the next speaker, Dwight Walker.
Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. Mr. Secretary, delegates to the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow friends. We meet again on our quest to bring peace and light into this world, but even though some of the clouds have lifted, the world has not yet escaped the darkness. The Continent Security Pact is rapidly expanding its influence. It is very troubling to see the democratic nations of Marcopa be threatened by these millennialist powers. I refer, of course, to the presence of Oxlanian and Continent fleets in the Marcan Sea.
They are harassing other nations and hampering international trade. Is this not an attack against world peace, an attack against the free trading nations of the world? Today, our obligations to world peace being tested by United Cantana and the Millennialist Bloc. If we fail to counter this threat, we stay idle and allow them to surround us with their war machines and blockades. If the attackers do not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believed we had built will be the world's downfall, and posterity will point its finger at us for not stopping it. Emmerich Hegel and the other Volkswagen delegates started making noise again. This time, Hegel had taken off his shoe and was banging the table with it. Wow, what an old douche canoe. I have no words. The Chancellor's gone mad. It's getting pretty ridiculous. He's not even ashamed at his age. Despite his claims, the CSP's actions will only bring about war. Yet we still believe United Cantana and Arcasia, together with their allies, can come to an understanding for our mutual benefits and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. We believe that all the people of the world must be free to choose their own future. No country, be it Arcasia or United Cantana, has the right to impose its value on others. But I will say this to the leaders of United Cantana. If either of us is to be secure, we need a powerful cooperation, not defense systems, forced blockades, or shows of naval superiority. If the Alliance of Nations cannot find a resolution to this conflict, the ATO remains ready and able to react. Hegel stood up with his shoe in his hand.
What's that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations. Mr. President, this cannot...
Nines slammed the gavel down and shouted, silence please.
Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We did not interrupt you when you addressed the Assembly. I must also raise my concerns about the threat that Romberg poses to Eastern Makopa. The speakers who preceded me clearly show that tensions are rising. Reports from Valen and Solent are troubling. The representatives from both countries referred to K-74s being smuggled within their borders. Mr. Rain also pointed out the construction of nuclear weaponry in Rumberg. Our intelligence also confirms this. Arcasia and the ATO stand against the aggression of Rumberg. They are playing a dangerous game, one that may bring ruin to Makopa and their lands. I believe the Alliance of Nations can find a resolution to this conflict as well. If not, let it be known that Arcasia will stand together with Solomon. Rumberg cannot do as it pleases. Do you think Rumberg can pursue any more aggression after that statement? I doubt that. With our membership in ATO and Arcasia's clear support, the Queen needs to be crazy to try anything. Finally, I propose that the Alliance of Nations undertake the noble cause of helping the people of the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its Human Rights Declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organization. Its size and duties are increasing enormously and should adapt to the changing world. But peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organization alone. They rely on the hearts of our people and the spirit of cooperations between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve a lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the assembly applauded his speech, the ATO delegates in particular. That speech had very dangerous connotations to it. Yes, I hope we won't be seeing a direct war between the superpowers anytime soon. That would be the destruction of the planet. The applause continued for some time. Walker shook hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Nines announced the last speaker before the break. It was Leon Maleniev. Maleniev slowly walked to the rostrum in his iconic suit. All of the CSP delegates stood up and applauded him. Honorable Chairman and fellow delegates to the Assembly of the Alliance of Nations, here we are again at the most esteemed meeting of state representatives in the world. However, increasingly we are being threatened, disregarded, attacked, or ignored in this assembly. Representative Arcasia has just shown this unfriendly attitude towards us yet again. Arcasia would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace, yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and growing base in the developing world. The ATO kept waging wars against people's revolutions and forcing new independent states to be their puppets, binding them to themselves in the Arcasian era. And now yet another Arcasian president is telling us that we are the aggressors and they are the keepers of peace. We will not be silent anymore against these lies. When was this peace you talk about? Where was this cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? Have
If you don't like us, don't accept our deals, don't listen to our concerns, keep pointing fingers at us, or why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Contana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people. People who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. Whether you like it or not, we'll keep representing the laborers, the slaves, the oppressed of this world. And believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us. Come and see the revolution working in Contana. Show our continent to your people without distorting the reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end. Such is the logical conclusion of the development of humankind.
This time, lesbian delegates started laughing very loudly. Some other delegates booed. Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah, the laugh or the laughing?
Both.
You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you.
Suddenly, the laughing turned into shouting.
If you really believe in cooperation, we will be waiting. We are not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural that the CSP will react. Despite threats from the ATO, Rumberg, or any other nation organization, we must not succumb to further division and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do the people of our countries expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and a better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions and complex problems. The leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations and succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Let us act in such a way to make this session not a session of threats, but a session of hopes and the realization of them. The government of United Contana, the United Peoples of Contana, are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution.
I didn't react to his speech. The assembly broke into massive applause. Applause continued for some time. Malnev slowly walked back to his seat as the president announced a break.
That was a lot.
It was troubling. Tensions are too high.
It's quite scary, to be honest. We need to be careful.
We walked out of the hall to have some lunch and fresh air. Jeez. Okay, that took a very long time. Very interesting, though. Glad we got to kind of blow the whistle on Rumberg with their, nuclear arms program. Alright, so it looks like we're going to be kind of just continuing on with this, maybe? I don't know. But I guess we'll figure that out next time. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you all next time.